Welcome to Construction Cashflow. I'm your host, Stu Davidson, and if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
We're doing it because we're all infighting. You know, the procurement chain from top to bottom is fighting each other. The people at the top of the tree are getting the jobs done cheaper than they should, and we're all losing out, and it's crazy. Everyone's polishing the turd on the way up. We all have to work to try and improve the margins, because if we improve the margins, we take the pressure off the industry. There is a constant fear of bankruptcy, either your own or people around you. It has to change. Construction is a hard game. It's a complicated game. It's often complex. There's a hell of a lot to it, and it deserves to be rewarded for what it is. Everything in construction is about reporting what's happening, and it's about risk management. If you manage the risk properly, you're halfway to being successful. The abusive level of downward pressure on staff throughout the supply chain, it's not main contractors, it goes to clients, consultants are equally as bad. It goes all the way through the train. When we lose sight of humans, individuals, their feelings, then we just become abusers. I'm quite an advocate on mental health issues, and I'm happy to talk about it now because there are issues that affect a lot of other people in the industry around mental health and the treatment they receive. When I told them I had mental health problems, their treatment of me got worse. The judge recorded that they never offered me any help, any support, or anything. That has to change. That has to change.
In this show, we ask our guests to tell us their story, tell us a little bit about their background, how they got to where they are today, how they develop their product, their services, their ideas, and we discuss how that can affect construction cash flow and other areas of construction, and also to give us an idea of how we might make things better and give you a few tips and ideas to take away with you. And listen to the end, where you'll find out more about them, more about our guests, about what motivates them, what inspires them, and hopefully that'll inspire you too. And always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. In this episode, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the one and only Richard Brackstone. Richard has many years' experience in the construction industry, working on all sides of the fence, from consultancy, contractors and specialist subcontractors. He's a highly accomplished business executive and entrepreneur, and he's also known for his expertise in corporate strategy, finance, leadership and risk management. He is the founder and CEO of RBMC Consultancy and has built a reputation for creating innovative solutions and driving successful outcomes for his clients. He's a prolific influencer and contributor on LinkedIn, and he's a lot of fun to be with. And so it's without further ado and my pleasure to introduce you to Richard Brackstone. Hi Richard, really great to have you on here. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks Stuart, and thanks for inviting me on. I'm pleased to be here.
Oh, you're so welcome.
We've turned up in almost the same jumpers.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, that's cool.
we got the memo.
We're QSs sticking together. So, Richard, tell us a bit about your story and how you got to where you are now.
Well, it's been a bit of a journey, that's for sure. So, I guess like a lot of people, I fell into construction by pure chance. When I was at school, for many years, I wanted to be a copper. I wanted to be a traffic cop and chase people around in fast cars. But then I realised you had to go on the beat for 2 years and get beaten up before you could even apply. So I went off that. So I had no clue what I wanted to do, but I was in a lesson one day and they were talking to us about the exams and career options and all the rest of it. And I suddenly realised, I twigged onto this fact. I stuck my hand up and said, "Excuse me, sir, are you saying that after we've done the O-levels, we can leave, never come back, finished, done?" He was like, "Yeah." I went, "Sign me up for that." I couldn't wait to get out of there. Now, I shouldn't have been doing that. I went to a grammar school. I went to one of the best grammars in the country at the time. It was, in its heyday, it was second only to Manchester Grammar. But I hated every moment of being there. And I've now discovered that I'm neurodiverse. And looking back, I can see how that environment just didn't suit me at all. And I'm not sure that any school environment would have suited me. So I left school. My parents were intent that you worked for a living. So they made me go out and get a job. I went out, I got a job in a local stationery and office equipment suppliers. And I used to regularly rip out the stockroom, rearrange it all, tidy it up, things like that. I muscled in and took over doing the window displays in the front of the shop because I just needed to keep the brain occupied. I couldn't stand. We used to have, this is before Office Depot and Amazon and all those places. So we used to get orders from local firms. We'd box up the orders and they'd get shipped out with a driver. So if we didn't have people in the shop, we didn't have orders, I'd get bored and I hated it. And I've always been that way. So after a while, I realised that wasn't long-term for me. I went back to see the local council careers officers and this lady said to me in talking, "Have you ever thought of becoming a surveyor?" Now, I knew that being stuck in an office all the time was never going to be any good for me. And I knew that I wasn't one to work with my hands or on the tools. That's not me at all. And I said, "Surveyor, what do they do?" She said, "Well, you'd spend half your time in the office and half your time out on site." I went, "Yeah, that sounds good." So she sent me to see the head of construction at our local technical college. He assumed that I wanted to be a QS. I didn't have a clue. Started talking to me about being a quantity surveyor. And he talked about quantity surveyors being a bit like the accountants of the building industry. Not entirely accurate, but and I thought, accountants, they earn well. Now, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s sitcoms where there was always, the affluent accountant in suburbia. So I thought, yeah, they do all right. I'll have some of that. So he gave me a list of construction companies that sent them pupils. And I wrote to about 30 companies. I think I got 3, maybe 4 replies. I got 1, thanks but no thanks. 1, well, come and see us. If we think you're absolutely brilliant, then we'll give you a job. And then 1 proper, come and have an interview for our training scheme, which is what I did. I went along. I talked about QSs being the accountants of the building industry. They thought I obviously knew what I was talking about. I hadn't got a clue, but it got me in. And I did a 4-year indentured training with Fairclough Building, a name that's long since disappeared. You'll be old enough to remember Fairclough, but a big name in their day. Obviously merged with Matthew Hall eventually and became AMEC, and then that disintegrated. And one of the many names that's disappeared. But yeah, that's what I did. And so for 4 years, I trained as a QS, doing day release at college, one long day and one separate evening for 4 years, once a week, and learned on the job as I went along. And I very quickly discovered that I had a natural bent for being a QS. It just suited me, which was pure fluke, because if she hadn't made that suggestion and things hadn't gone the way they did, I have not the slightest clue 40 years later what I would have done as an alternative. I really don't know where I'd have been. So it's been a tough journey. It's not an easy game, but I don't know what the hell I'd have done if I hadn't fallen into construction. So that's how I got into construction. And then it's been a long journey of ups and downs and all the rest of it ever since then.
What an amazing story. I can relate to your school isn't for everyone. Our daughter, we took her out of school actually, and the headmistress actually said that you know, the mainstream school is not for everyone. So my daughter Emma went on to be very successful, being she was actually homeschooled the last few years as a teenager, went on to do very, very well. And it's great that I can see your attention to detail. You know, I've seen some of your posts on the LinkedIn and your reports. Amazing. And I can really.
OCD tendencies is one of the things I've been diagnosed.
Very much detail, and I can relate. I remember the days of with my QS training, the day release, and always I remember you'd spend all day, and we used to do an evening at the end of the day as well, which made it a long day.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you used to
at night.
Yeah, and you used to get to the canteen at the end, and all they had was some shriveled up beans and a shriveled up pie to eat.
Did
you know,
get
it was really starving. We may have done. We may well have done. Yeah. And so that was it. I ended up in QSing as I think I got in the wrong queue. I think I wanted construction management, but I ended up, and because I had to wait in the queue a long time, I thought, oh well, this would do, you know. So I ended up in that.
The hysterical thing is, I turned up on this building site on my first day, and I lived in Sidcup in Kent, southeast London, and my first job was Norbiton Bus Garage, literally the other side of London to the west. So on my little motorbike then, that was a long journey for me, and I actually scoped it out the day before on a Sunday. I rode to Norbiton and found this site that I was going to the day before. But I turned up on this site and walked into this building site with not the slightest clue what I'd signed up for or what I was going to be doing, really. It was just a revelation to me. But, I just hit it off with it straight away. I've never liked measurement. I don't like measurement off drawings or on site. I've never been a fan of measurement itself, but all the other sides, dealing with variations, maximising the income, dealing with commercial issues, contracts, contractual correspondence, commercial strategy, all that side of things has always absolutely fascinated me.
And I think that's the wonderful thing about quantity surveying, is such a broad spectrum of parts of it that you can specialise in. And, you know, particularly when you get around the contractual, the commercial side, it's very, very interesting. And then there's the other side, which is the quantification, the quantum, the measurement. I don't know about you, but one of the first jobs I had was learning how to fold an AO drawing. So I spent, you're probably old enough to remember that. That was one of my first jobs.
And it still drives me mad if you can't pick up a drawing and go like that and just open it because some buggers folded it up wrong. That still winds me up to this day. I can go better than that. When I was at the office equipment place, one of the bosses there taught me how to wrap a ream of paper properly. And that, my OCD, I'm still an obsessive present wrapper. If I wrap presents, they are wrapped.
Hey, great. We'll
Really
commission
bad.
you to come round and wrap all the presents up. Yeah, fantastic. So tell us about what you're involved in now then, Richard. You know, your product, your service, your idea, because I know that you've got some work that you do from a consultancy base. You've got a new thing that you're doing, and it's really interesting.
Yeah. So, well, there's a bit of a story behind how that came about. So my career took quite a trajectory. You know, I was training with Faircloughs, and then I left there. I was poached to go and work at Chelsea Harbour for an American-owned dry lining company. So I was going head-to-head with Bovis back in the day when it was an absolute war. I was a company director at 26 for a specialist joinery company as their commercial director. I then got poached to go to a fit-out company as commercial director for the fit-out business and various subsidiaries. And from that, I was fundamental in helping secure the refit of Warburg's headquarters in the city, which was was a £50 million job in '95. So heaven knows what that would be now, 150 million, I don't know. It was a big job, and yours truly ended up running it, which was crazy times. And then I ran my own business for a long time. Then I packed that up in 2009. 2008. I saw the recession coming. I didn't predict the banking crash. I wish I'd been able to do that, but I saw my clients with my business pulling back from work. So I then I took a job as a divisional director for the special works division of a regional contractor that was underperforming, and I turned that round and took it from doing half its budget to exceeding its budget, and increased its profitability. And then I left them and joined a fit-out company, and that was a disaster. And that actually ended up with a 2.5-year lawsuit for the Employment Tribunal against them. I suffered mental health problems, A, from the treatment that I received, and B, through existing conditions that I didn't even know I'd had, which had built up over the years of all the pushing through my career and never understanding my own mental health and thought processes, and thus my reaction to things. So that was a bitter 2.5-year legal battle, but I won. I did them for unfair constructive dismissal, repudiatory breach of contract, direct breach of contract, and disability discrimination. And I decided in the midst of that court case that I wasn't going to work for someone else again when it was over. I didn't work for those 2.5 years. Literally, my time was taken fully by the court case. And I'm happy to talk about it now, because there are issues that affect a lot of other people in the industry around mental health and the treatment they receive in the industry for that. But I'm quite an advocate on mental health issues. But I decided that I wanted to start my own consultancy business, and it's taken a while to get myself back to where I needed to be and to decide what I wanted to do. And so I set up RBMC to help companies improve their performance. I'm passionate about the low margins in the industry. We're all working for too little money. It's crazy. And we're doing it because we're all infighting. You know, the procurement chain from top to bottom is fighting each other. The people at the top of the tree are getting the jobs done cheaper than they should, and we're all losing out, and it's crazy. Now, don't get me wrong, some companies don't deserve to be successful because they're not good. Others do, and for various reasons, they're not necessarily as successful as they should be. So I set up RBMC to try and help with that, to try and help companies improve, be better, and hopefully improve their margins. And I'm passionate about it. So that's how I got to where I am and what RBMC is about.
The mental health issues are really important, aren't they? When you talk
Huge.
about, we're at war with each other, with there's conflict throughout the industry, and it really starts with individuals. And I think sometimes corporate bodies can forget that it's ordinary human beings that are involved in the processes, and we all kind of have that different mental capacities, if you like,
absolutely.
for things. Just going back to your situation, what was it really? Did you think that company really understood your
no, they didn't
mental
didn't understand me at
issues?
all. Didn't understand me at all. More importantly, they didn't care. When I told them I had mental health problems, their treatment of me got worse. It's in the court judgment that apart from telling me, yes, I must go to my counselling when I told them I was having counselling, and once telling me not to work so late, the judge recorded that they never offered me any help, any support, or anything. That has to change. That has to change. Selfish individuals intent on their own personal gain has to stop, and there's no need for it.
What do you think needs to be done in the industry? What could be done to help the situation, do you think?
Oh, huge amounts. I think we all have to work to try and improve the margins, because if we improve the margins, we take the pressure off the industry. And I'm not saying we should all be raking in loads of money and living the life of Riley, but there is a constant fear of bankruptcy, either your own or people around you. It has to change. Construction is a hard game. It's a complicated game. It's often complex. There's a hell of a lot to it, and it deserves to be rewarded for what it is. It's vital to the British economy. Hell, when COVID was on, the government was telling everyone else to stay at home, but telling construction to just carry on working because it was so important to the economy. So other than first responders and, the health professionals, the only people told to keep working were the construction industry. Now, I did lots of posts about that on LinkedIn at the time. I was quite controversial because I could see what's happening. We were being scapegoated. The idea was that construction would spread the virus slowly at a controlled rate that the NHS could cope with. You put 10% of the workforce out to work, you tell everyone else to stay home, you have a slow dispersal of the virus. That was my view. I stand by it to this day. I shouted it out at the time. And that is construction. It is vital to the economy. What we do, what we leave behind. Legacy is the absolute, greatest element of what we do, as far as I'm concerned. I've been privileged to work on some fantastic buildings. I worked on Horse Guards in Whitehall. When the place was gutted back in the 80s. And I worked on the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the Old War Office, these fabulous buildings in Whitehall. And the legacy you leave when you can walk past that building with the guards stood outside and look and say to your kids, see that window up there? That was my office. See all those roofs? We did all those. It's fabulous. And that's what I absolutely adore about the industry, apart from the technical challenges and all the rest of it. So we have to improve margins to get our worth. We have to realise, and I've often said this to teams that work for me, ignoring health and safety issues, but nobody's going to die. Do you know what I mean? If the job's late or, the variations go up or whatever it may be, nobody's going to die. And the abuse that people take and the reactions that you get from people at times two situations are extreme, and yet we're building stuff. We're putting one brick on top of another. We're cutting pieces of timber and screwing them to the wall. We're not doing open heart surgery. Get real, people. People don't die if the job's late. All right, someone will argue some extreme case. I'll put in a 20-bed, acute heart unit at Harefield Hospital. You can't argue if we were late with that somebody could have died because there wasn't a hospital bed. But you get my gist that, we're not saving lives with what we do. It's a job to physically leave a legacy, and it has to be kept in proportion.
There's a very human side to construction, and there's high levels of stress. It can be a very brutal industry, high levels of stress. One of the motivators for starting the podcast was to look at construction, the human side of construction cash flows, as well as the practical side of construction cash flow. And I kind of draw the analogy of the blood taking oxygen around the body is similar to cash flowing around the supply chain, around the business. And if the blood isn't carried to the right place at the right time, then the body has trouble. And it's the same with cash flow. And there's so many blockages. If you get a blockage in your blood flow, or if there's, we have one heart that pumps the blood and the oxygen around. It seems in construction there are many hearts competing for the same blood. So there's a very cultural and human side, and I come across it a lot. There's 90%, 95% of constructions carried out by businesses that employ less than 5 people. I'm not sure with the stats exactly right, but you get my drift. There's many small businesses, and these business owners.
Somebody once said to me, if you follow every procurement chain in construction, at the end of it, there's always one man in a white van. Slight exaggeration, but the gist is about right. Everything gets sublet and sublet and sublet and sublet and sublet, and you do get down to very small businesses more often than not. Yeah.
And being organised actually relieves stress, doesn't it? And sometimes these guys are thrown into contractual situations which they're not ready to be organised for. It creates stress. They leave themselves exposed.
Yeah, and one of the other key factors is honesty, transparency, and openness. And I've seen this time and time again, and it was certainly a huge issue at the previous company, where construction companies put themselves in trouble through insufficient resources at the start. And I've done a post on this a little while back, actually. Insufficient resources at the start, late procurement, signing up to lead times that are too short, and they start the job and they're on the back foot from day one, and they're behind, and then they're looking for the claim to get themselves out of trouble, and then that pressure is projected downwards from the board to those on the project that they've got to resolve that situation, when quite often it's been created by circumstances out of their control. And so if people are more honest and open and genuine in their dealings, they can, people have to be put under pressure to perform, but there's degrees, and the abusive level of downward pressure on staff throughout the supply chain. It's not main contractors, it goes to clients. Consultants are equally as bad. It goes all the way through the train. When we lose sight of humans, individuals, their feelings, then we just become abusers, and that has to change. I did warn you about stopping me talking, didn't I?
Hey, no, you talk away. That's amazing, and I'm listening. And you're exactly right. The culture needs to change, and I believe there needs to be more education about what the industry would traditionally call soft issues. And sometimes I think the soft issues are the hard issues, and they're the issues that we really need to address now. We're great at building buildings. We're great at the technical side. The structures we build are amazing, but what where we need to go is to, it's all about people and our own self-awareness and the awareness of people around us, those soft
Absolutely.
issues. And when we're aware and when we're less stressed and we're in that space where we can think and we can create, then we're going to build even greater, a greater built environment.
If you're not open and transparent with people and you put this downward pressure on them, and this is one of the things I talk to people about, because RBMC is about improving companies and particularly risk management, commercial best practice. And if you put this downward pressure on people, and you don't have an open culture, what happens is that people hide things. They hope that they're not going to get found out. They push things under the carpet. They try and blame each other. They blame somebody else. They'll tell you the sub is not performing when actually they're causing them bedlam on site. And as a director, you're not getting told the true picture because the people are paranoid that they're going to be in trouble over it. And so actually it's counterproductive. But people need to realize this. Everything in construction is about reporting what's happening, and it's about risk management. If you manage the risk properly, you're halfway to being successful in construction. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to educate people on. But
that's what I in fact, I wanted to come on to that because you provide a service which is company risk analysis.
Yeah.
And I read one of your reports earlier that you'd posted on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I think that it's an amazing report.
Thank you.
Looking at it from a business, from a business perspective, from a director perspective, it's something that I would certainly think that it's imperative to have done, and maybe at least once a year. And I liked it that it covered the main pillars of where the risk areas are.
Yep.
And it was very concise, and I loved the way it was structured. So in a matter of a few minutes, half an hour, I can then get a screenshot, a picture of where I need to focus my attention.
You've got
and
it.
Felt so good reading it. And I felt, do you know what? I immediately felt as if it was a stress relief because so I've now got a visual of my business and where my risks are and where I need to focus. And I would recommend that anybody that's got a business that hasn't had one done, get one done, because it could mean the difference between A, reducing your stress levels, and B, whether your company actually survives or not, or thrives. So take us through that service.
You've just done a pretty good job. Thanks for that. And of course, I'd absolutely agree that any construction company that hasn't got us to do one should get us to do one. But it was designed, and a lot of work's gone into it. And it was designed, it came off the back of a conversation I had with somebody about the industry. When I was talking to somebody early on and they was asking me what I was going to do, and I was trying to get my head focused on what it was going to be that I wanted to do and how I used my strengths to help other people, which is key to what I'm trying to do. I realized that companies don't have any way of measuring their risk management. So they all think they're good at it or not good at it or whatever. But what we do, and what the concept I came up with is of setting this baseline where you stress test the business across the key operational pillars. We don't go into marketing and business development and anything like that. We're talking about the operational procedures to run the business day to day, and whether it's structured in a way that manages risk. Because I have this concept that I've labeled active risk management. And the idea behind it is that if you embed risk management in your day-to-day procedures, rather than having it as a separate kind of exercise that you do, then you're managing that risk day to day actively, hence where the active risk management comes from. The analogy that I put to is it's a bit like antivirus software. It's there working all the time in the same way the antivirus software is stopping the viruses coming in, your processes are managing the risk, and they're stopping the risk, hopefully, adversely affecting you. And it's also about educating people within the business so that the staff understand the risks. So I'll give you a classic. This is a free giveaway for anyone out there. And I don't understand why, well, most companies that I've ever come across, nobody does it properly. Most companies don't do it at all. Don't sit down at the start of every job, having negotiated the contract terms, and then produce a written, brief, understandable summary for the project team of the do's and don'ts on that project and what they mean, particularly where you've got, contractual requirements that you have to comply with. If the staff don't understand them, and just as importantly, don't understand the implications, it's going to go wrong. So most companies, the vast majority, rely on the ability, the experiences, the education of their staff. And that's right. We're all paid a salary to do a job, but that's not taking it a stage further. That's not actively managing the risk, and it's not managing the risk as well as you could. So there's a freebie. If you're a construction company and you're not doing that, start doing it now.
So important. Thanks for that, Richard. And it made me think of, again, in terms of cash flow, something I'm interested in. It's not something that you do at the beginning of the job. It's something you need to look at it every day. So, or even if you're a business owner, it's something you need to put aside each day and just look at it, just know it and live it and understand where it's going, the ins and outs. And like this one, it's so important, isn't it, to communicate, because quite often we'll sign up to construction contract, that the directors will agree the contract, then it goes into the drawer, or the managing director or the project manager, the site agent might have sight of it, the QS will have sight of it, but then where does that go from there? I mean, nobody else in the whole, quite often nobody else in the supply chain understand the key risk and principles that were agreed in the contract.
Absolutely.
So no wonder it's going awry.
If you've got conditions, precedents, a contract precedent to getting an entitlement, it might be going along swimmingly for months until something happens and the job suddenly goes wrong, and then all of a sudden everyone starts looking at their position and goes, we should have done this and we should have done that and we should have done the other. Well, it's too late then. You should know that day one, and you should be actively managing it and avoiding it in the first place. And it doesn't mean being contractual. Again, I've posted about this on LinkedIn. Looking after your position doesn't mean you have to be aggressive, doesn't mean you have to be overly contractual. You haven't set the terms. Normally, the terms come down to you and you try and get the best haggle you can on the terms. But the terms come from the top down. And if somebody has put a condition in there that says you must do X, Y, Z to secure your position, then do X, Y, Z. Do it nicely, do it politely. You don't have to, make a big fuss about it, but do it. That's what the contract says. And if somebody starts arguing with you, point them to their own contract and say, well, what do you want me to do? Well, let's renegotiate the contract then. If you're not happy about me recording things the way that you've demanded I do them, let's stop, let's renegotiate the contract, and let's come up with a different process. Are they going to do that? Of course they're not. But you demonstrate the point, and then you move forward from there. They either accept that you're complying with the terms they've given you, or they agree to change them. You can't have it both ways.
It's interesting. Lawrence Pierce, who's in the kind of LinkedIn group,
I know Lawrence.
Lawrence, he talks about going through each clause and doing the who, why, what, where, when against each clause. And this kind of takes it on one step further. Is okay, so how do we communicate that to the staff that matter, or the people that matter? How do we, and what are the risks around the what, why, where, when, who? So it's kind of, that kind of brings together the, not just the high level, but how is that disseminated then throughout the project? Well, it's kind of what I think you're coming from.
Yeah, but it starts from that first analysis and giving a list to your staff of the do's and don'ts, so they understand them. In not everyone's a QS, not everyone's a very experienced contractual manager. A lot of ops people aren't, and they don't want to be, but they have to operate within a framework that is the reality of life. So give them the knowledge, give them the understanding, a simple format of what the do's and don'ts are, and then you've got to keep managing that every month. When you're having your review meetings, you've got to look at those issues. One of the biggest mistakes, another freebie coming up, and one of the biggest mistakes that contractors make is they don't review their critical path as they go through the project. So every month they sit down and they talk about progress, and they go, oh, we're 10% behind on the brickwork, and we're 4% ahead on the electrics, and we're doing great over here. Oh, we haven't procured the windows, that's going to be a problem. But they don't, quite often, in my experience, they don't actually stop and look at the critical path properly. And all right, there's been a lot of debate about critical paths recently. There's been a legal judgment, where the judge, more or less disregarded the issue of critical paths and just looked at delays as they were. But the reality is there is a critical path. It changes constantly. And if you're not actually reviewing the critical path and your progress against that, and what is the critical path at the moment, what's going to happen? You ain't finishing on time. It's not rocket science. So manage your risks properly, understand them, identify them, manage them, and
it reinforces the concept of actually knowing what's going on a daily basis, and keeping records on a daily basis, the right records on a daily basis. Looking at the critical path, it's the only way you can look at the critical path on a daily basis. Look at your cash flow on a daily basis. Look at the any risks that are coming up, the quality on a daily basis. So trying to go back retrospectively and work out cause and effect is very, very difficult. And I think that's where the lawyers rub their hands together. They go, this is great. They've got to go back 6 months, remember what the cause and effect was.
And
so if you're on top of it,
it's
exactly
hugely expensive. And again, another mistake contractors make, they under-resource projects. Oh, I'm not spending more on the prelims, and they might, not spend another 10, 20, 30 grand on an additional member of staff on a project because they're losing money, but they'd be losing far more than that, hand over fist, in other areas of the project, and the potential outcome. You've got to look realistically at the big picture, the whole scenario, and say, okay, I'm spending another 50 grand. I'm having another QS or another site manager or whatever it might be on that job, because the downside of me not doing that is going to be £500,000 in damages or whatever. Another classic mistake. I'm giving away all the jewels today, aren't I? Another classic mistake: late procurement. And I've had surveyors come to me in the past, been looking for a job, being interviewed, and complain to me about this, where companies have procedures that say you cannot let a subcontract that's going to lose money. So you get a QS, he's got a subcontractor let, he's going to lose 5 grand on it. He's been to God knows how many plasterers to get a quote. He can't match the price that they've got in for the job, and the powers that be above, who are not directly involved in trying to sort out the problem, are just going, no, that's our procedure. You've got to find somebody that can do it for that price. Meantime, they're doing 20 grand a week in damages. you know, the plastering's not going on the wall. They're 4 weeks late. They're into 80 grand's worth of damages, and everyone's still running about worrying about the fact that the particular package is going to be 5 grand over budget. Hello, boys, wake up and smell the coffee. Get with a program, for heaven's sake. You know, it's not sensible, and it's not looking at the whole picture. So there's another one.
So where you're looking at the big picture, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I quite often talk about a bigger picture in terms of construction supply chains being affected by outside influences. So there's the project at hand, then there's their overall business operation. So I talk about robbing Peter to pay Paul, that goes on from finances from other projects to finance this project and vice versa. Cash farming and other wider influences, and it kind of brings me back to your analysis work that you do, the risk analysis, where you look at the 5 pillars, because sometimes it can be other matters that are not necessarily direct with the particular project, but other matters in the business that
or outside the business.
Outside the business that are affecting the performance of that particular project. And another interest that I have is around mergers and acquisitions, which looks at the broader spectrum of a business's performance. You know, I always say, if you're going to look to start a business, look how to buy one first, and then you'll know how to run one. And I liked your analysis with the 5 pillars because it looks at that broader context. And I would say that would be a great report to have for anybody buying a company. You know, I really do. It's fantastic.
We've talked about this internally, about the fact that we could actually go and do it on a company that's a subject for an acquisition, because it would give them a really good snapshot of where the business is. I've actually had some experience in acquisitions in the past. I've actually gone in to a company when I was at the fit out business, slightly allied to what we were doing, but we had a contract cleaning business, which was where the fit out company had originally started, and it bought another cleaning business. Now, I don't know anything about contract cleaning, but I know about people, and I can understand, you know, the way people talk to me. So the MD sent me in to review all the staff in that business and come back and give him a report on what I thought about them before he actually bought the business. You know, and I sat down with them and talked through what they did and how the business worked. So absolutely, what we do is definitely, you know, fully usable in that scenario. And the other thing that people forget, and in fact, there's been a great reminder of it over the weekend, with the settlement between the government and KPMG over the horrendous fiasco of the Carillion audits. We won't go into the detail of that. It was a particular hobby horse of mine, the Big Four and their auditing of construction companies, well, any business actually. But when you look at construction company figures, they're all made up. But that's what people don't understand outside the industry, and that's what most people inside the industry don't understand either, is that when you take an account on a project, in the midst of that project, if you take it at the highest level from the main contractor's account to the client, and even the QS's budget beyond that to the client, every number's made up. It's a made up view of where the project is, how much work has been done, how much work hasn't been done, how many variations there are, what those variations are worth, what the cost of those variations is to the business. Every number is made up. And if you don't understand how to interrogate those numbers, you're just purely working on trust in everything that's presented to you. And I've done a lot of, you know, I spent a lot of time as a commercial director in various businesses, and as part of that job, in a nice way, challenging my staff about numbers, where they've got them from, what they mean, are they sensible, you know, are they realistic? So it's not like having a factory that makes widgets and you've got 4 million bits of plastic or whatever to make the widgets, in the corner, and that's your stock, and you've sold 10 widgets and you should have sold 10 million. Construction is all about an assessment, an analysis of the figures, and how well you do that is how well your numbers are. And time again, company failures, Tolan, look at Tolan. Some of the stories that are coming out of Tolan, of problem jobs, they just demonstrate that the same old thing that we've seen time and time again, of skeletons coming out of the closet and biting people on the bum with construction projects. All of a sudden, all these skeletons come out the cupboard, they come home to roost, and the next thing, the company's bust. It runs out of cash, it can't trade, it can't sustain the lies and smokescreen anymore. And it all comes home to roost eventually. It's called the final account. You get what you get. And if you've been telling everyone you're going to get a lot more than you get, it's coming home to roost.
I had a similar conversation with Sebastian Tavares recently on recording his podcast, and we were talking about that. And it's interesting what you say about the made up figures, because you're taking a slice of time, and there's a lot of assumptions. Yep. And most numbers in construction during a project are based on certain assumptions. Yep. But people don't observe the assumptions and manage the assumptions as they go along. And that's where, as you say, the skeletons come out the closet, the chickens come home to roost, because they've not even, yourself, if you're doing a budget, you've got all your budget figures, and then at the back there's a list of assumptions. Whoever reads the assumptions, but that's where the grey area, that's the bit that needs managing, the assumptions.
And it goes back to the earlier point about honesty and transparency. And if you're beating everyone down, and they're terrified of what's going to happen to them, they're going to hide the truth. And when that hiding the truth comes from the corporate level all the way down, then that's when you get, the really big problems that bring down companies. Somebody once said it to me, when I was talking to them about the way construction works, they said to me, "Oh, right, so everyone's polishing the turd on the way up." And I said, well, yeah, it's blunt, but it's true, because, if you look at a big contracting organisation, the report will start at site level, and that depends what stories the subbies are telling the contractor, and it goes up and it goes to, a managing QS or whatever, and he might tidy it up a little bit, and then it goes up to a regional board and they have a little tweak, and and by the time it actually gets to PLC, the figures are meaningless. And if nobody's got the proper insight as to what's happening all the way down, the due diligence being done, problems will happen.
So in terms of your service and that you provide, which I think is very, very valuable, particularly around, I liked your report on retentions, which was great, which starts a discussion, starts a debate going, but particularly about your 5 pillars of analysis for company, and that's amazing. So who would your service primarily be for?
It's for anyone in construction. And it's for anyone in construction that wants to make their business better. It's about people that want to create the best version of their company they can, and that want to genuinely work on making their business better. And you've got to have the right approach to doing it. Otherwise, anyone can do it. And the way we do the report is we come in, we spend 2 days with your senior managers, we take the heads of departments for the 4 business pillars. So health, safety, environmental, corporate governance, operational performance, and commercial management. And we sit with the heads of those departments and we ask them loads of questions that we've written. I spent 2 months writing questions. And then we gather all that information, we take it away, we put that information into a weighted scoring matrix that I've created, and we come back with a report which is scored. And that's important. That's one of the key issues, is that anyone can come in and look at a company and say, oh yeah, I think you're pretty good, or you're not doing very well, or whatever. But actually what we've done is taken it a stage further, and we actually score it, and we give you metrics. And that's the key thing, because from those metrics, you identify the particular weak or risk areas, and you identify the good areas. And so sometimes they can be really surprising. You know, you can have a really good company, really clued up commercially, but actually they're doing one thing wrong. And the one that I know you've seen talks about not doing zero payment notices, and just assuming that because you didn't pay the contractor anything last month, and he hasn't done anything since, you don't need to do him a payment notice. Well, that's naive and stupid, because you just open yourself up to a smash and grab. It's not difficult to manage these things if you're focused, and that's what we do. We give that score, and we give the written report that says, yeah, you're really good at commercial, but you're just missing this one bit. And then from there, they do with it what they want. They can put it on the shelf and let it cover that, collect dust. They can sit back and bask in the glory that they've scored really well, and actually they don't need to do a lot. And that in itself, how valuable is that? Is knowing that actually you stress tested your business, and actually you were right. You are pretty damn good at what you're doing. I think I think that's a valuable exercise in itself. But if you have got any weaknesses, you identify them, and you can either deal with them yourself, you can bring other people in to deal with them, or of course you can ask us and what I call our knowledge bank of people behind to come in and help you deal with those issues and improve them. But the choice is entirely up to the client what they do from that point. And then in the ideal situation, you call us back next year and we do it again, and we measure the improvement, because everything that gets measured gets better. Someone said that to me a little while back, and at first I thought, oh, that's one of those, sayings that get thrown about. And then I stopped and thought about it, and I thought about it particularly in terms of what we were doing and what we were creating, and I thought, do you know what? It's absolutely spot on. Because if you measure how good your risk management is, then you can improve it. If you can't measure it, how do you improve it? And that's exactly what we're about with the construction company risk appraisal.
So how can people contact you, Richard, and find out more about your service?
Yep. So they can, obviously they can contact me through LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so they can DM me through LinkedIn. They'll find me on there. They can email me, Richard B at rbmandc.com, which is rbmandc.com. Or they can give me a call, 028 27 07 4070. Always happy to talk.
I'll put the details. I'll put the links in the podcast notes for when the episode comes out, so they can watch the episode and then click on the link and then come and find you that way. So Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Some real nuggets in there, some great advice. Great advice in there. And now, so have you time for the quick fire round for motivation inspiration? Okay, ready. So first question then. Yeah. How do you start your day?
Slowly. I'm not a morning person. I've got one speed in the morning, dead slow.
When are you most productive?
Well, during the day, but I also tend to get second wind in the evenings, which can be really annoying. I'll tend to think I should go to bed. Let's do some more work. And next thing you know, it's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm still working. So, yeah, I'm a bit like that.
What's something new that's happening in your life right now?
Well, trying to get RBMC off the ground is the absolute priority at the moment. So yeah,
What does adventure look like to you?
to me, it's getting up every day and surviving. Life is a struggle. Life isn't easy. Life involves problems. It involves adventure. I'm not one for big, ego boosting, adventurous type things. I think anything you do that takes you out of your comfort zone is being adventurous. So whatever it may be, in business, in life, in social, in whatever it is, if you're taking yourself outside your comfort zone, you're being adventurous. You don't have to go and, create a Guinness World Record or something, or do something incredibly dangerous to be adventurous. That said, I have been challenged to go up in a light plane at the moment, and I'm toying with that one because I'm terrible with heights, which isn't necessarily the ideal thing for someone in construction. You should see me tarting around on a scaffold at times.
So this one might be linked and it might not. What thing would you love to do that might surprise your friends and family?
Well, there's not much that would surprise my close friends and family. I'm a pretty open book kind of guy. Wear my heart on my sleeve, tell it as it is. So people pretty much know, what makes me tick and what I wouldn't like to do. But one that not necessarily everyone out there would know, I would love to cuddle a big cat. I love big cats, which is funny because I'm not a domestic cat person. I'm a dog person. I've got 4 of them and absolutely adore them. But I've always loved big cats. I actually know someone that's got 2 tigers, lives just around the corner from me. But you can't cuddle them, unfortunately. But yeah, cuddle a big cat.
Name a challenge that you overcame that changed your life.
We may have touched on this one already. A 2.5-year legal battle against an obnoxious employer. Yeah, and the mental health issues. Yeah, huge challenge. That's the one.
What or who what inspires you and motivates you?
Motivates me is my family. Everything I do is for my family. It's as simple as that. That's what drives me every day, is to be successful for my family, to give them the best that I can. It's always been that way. That's kind of linked to who inspires me, because who inspires me is my dad, who's no longer with us. We were extremely different characters. I could do a podcast on my dad just on himself, but he spent his entire adult life giving back to people through his work and through charities and everything else that he did, and his morality and his approach to life. That's what inspires me every day, to try and be a better version of me. Yeah.
What does success mean for you?
Success for me means I don't have a problem with people chasing, monetary success and aspirational things, and I think that's good. It's when it gets excessive and becomes all about vanity things and all the rest of it. So success to me is about having a comfortable lifestyle and looking after my family, but it's also about how I live my life and how I deal with others and raising my kids, that I'm proud of them. I think we've done a pretty good job on that. Not perfect, but a pretty good job. So yeah, it's about helping others along the way. You know, not it's not necessarily again about going out doing big flash demonstrable things. You know, but it's about, do you help people when you have the opportunity, or do you walk on by? That to me is a measure of success, and it's a measure of how you live your life. You know, so it's those kind of things that, you know, success is to me. Yeah.
What advice would you give to your young self?
Oh, huge amounts. I don't even know where to start with that. There's been so much has happened in my life, in and out of work. But more importantly than what I would tell my young self, it's what I try and tell my kids now. And I have a really open, honest relationship with my kids. And I try to share all my life experiences and my mistakes and my positives with them, so that they have a better understanding as they move forward and lead their life. So, yeah, I would tell my young self a huge amount, and my young self wouldn't listen.
Thank you, Richard. Well, you're an amazing dad, an amazing professional, and an amazing guest. Thank you so much.
Stuart, thank you. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been listening to Construction Cashflow. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so you never miss an episode. And remember, the faster cash flows, the faster wealth grows. And don't forget, if you enjoyed the show, give us a rating and review.